This is NBC Palm Springs. Breaking news.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Gino Lamont.
And I'm Sarah Sanchez. We begin with extreme heat across the entire West and an energy crisis here in California as the state's power grid hits its peak.
Yeah, that's where we're going to start tonight with the extended extreme heat conditions for the length of the state of California. Temperatures hovering in the teens for a next week and a half, putting pressure on the energy supply across the state. We could see temporary interruptions, commonly called rolling blackouts. California Independent Systems Operator, or CAL-ISO, just declared a stage 2 emergency. Rolling blackouts could begin at any moment. Several Coachella Valley cities on Southern California Edison's power grid could have rolling blackouts, starting with Desert Hot Springs, Palm Springs, Cathedral City, Rancho Mirage, Indian Wells, parts of La Quinta. Governor Newsom is taking action tonight.
And take a look at this. This is a real-time look at our energy usage, according to CAL-ISO. There are two numbers we need to focus on here, and that's the available energy capacity, which sits at just around 50,000 megawatts. It just went down to 49. You see that number there, 49,757. We're sitting right now at the current demand is about 45,000. That's the number on the right. So that's about how much demand is on the system right now. And if those two meet, that's when we could see those blackouts.
We are currently and urgently deploying resources across the spectrum, working to reduce our energy use. I signed an emergency proclamation that very specifically, very demonstrably, directly shifts energy consumption in this state. We're focused primarily on large energy users, and we are shifting to their backup power so they can utilize that power during the peak hours.
Yeah, those peak hours are from 3 in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. The California Independent Operating System, or as we mentioned, CAL-ISO, had this to say about the state's energy grid during a virtual news conference a short time ago.
We have a perfect storm going on here. And usually when we have enough capacity in California, if you count what's in California and you count what we normally get in the region. What we have is a situation where the entire region is more than hot. It's extremely hot. And that is very much a contributing factor to this issue. We can't get the energy that we would normally get from out of state because it's being used to serve load natively. So that would probably account for another 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts and could very well have closed the gap.
California DMV offices are now shortening their hours, closing at 3 p.m. through Wednesday to help conserve energy. And the Rancho Mirage Library and other city facilities will close early for the same reason. The extreme heat is dangerous, too. We want to warn you, a couple images of burn patients we're about to show you are graphic, but they illustrate the dangers of this heat. Several people ended up at the hospital over the weekend with burns. Officials at Desert Regional Medical Center say several people have come in needing treatment for these burns from searing streets and searing sidewalks.
The contact surfaces, especially if they're black or non-reflective, they can reach above 15-20 degrees above the environmental temperature. So you can have easily a surface of 145 degrees. You only need 10 seconds of contact to develop partial thickness or full thickness third-degree burn.
And to stay safe, if you do have to go out as early as possible in the day to avoid the peak heat of the day. We're going to turn things over now to Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett first, taking a look at our Agua Caliente Casino Cam in Rancho Mirage. Yeah, it's hot out there. Mike, what are the temperatures looking like?
Well, temperature's actually not that hot today, especially compared to what we saw yesterday, but we did break some records across Southern California. I'll give you a update on that in just a moment. Rolling blackouts. This is something we've been talking about since Friday. Just a quick reminder to have a plan in place. It's very similar to the one that you have in place for your earthquake preparedness this time of year. And it all has to do with what happens if you run out of electricity. Well, having extra water around is always a good idea. 1 gallon per person per day is usually what they say is a good idea to have there. Keeping your car filled with gas just in case it becomes your only source of air conditioning. They say that in the most extreme cases, heading out to your car for about 10 10 minutes every hour, and allowing yourself to cool a little bit would be a good way to get through that. And having extra ice as well. Just fill up the extra ice cube trays at home and put some of that in the freezer in case you need it. Limit daytime electricity usage. If you can limit your laundry and your dishwasher, try and run them overnight if you can. That helps take a little bit of strain off the power grid. And cooling centers. We have a list of all the cooling centers in the Coachella Valley at NBCPalmSprings.com. Head over there. You'll see how many there are. This is what we're talking about. This isn't just a Coachella Valley thing. Everything that you see in purple here is the excessive heat warning. Went into place on Friday, stayed through the weekend, and now has been extended out through Thursday. You'll see the numbers in a moment. You'll understand why, but the entire state of California out into Arizona, into Nevada, and even into parts of Utah as well, experiencing this extreme heat. So let's talk about records. We did it today. Borrego got up to 115, shattered the old record going back to 1986. San Jacinto, the town, not the mountain, got up to 109 today, broke their old record by a long shot. Campo got up to 106 today, and Idlewild not only hit 98 degrees, breaking their old record of 95, but it's the hottest temperature ever recorded in August in Idlewild. Temperatures today, Palm Springs International, seem fairly tame by comparison. 113 is where we got to. 106 is the 30-year average. Record for today's date, 118 set back in 1950. But it's this overnight number that still has me concerned with all of this moisture in the air. We are not cooling at night. 78 is the 30-year average. 90 is where we got to. And in case you're wondering, yep, we keep track of that as well. These all broke records. Palm Springs' old record for overnights was 87. Indio, Borrego, Thermal, Idlewild. And what the other eye-popping part of this is that you don't have to go very far back into the almanac to see 2015, 2013, 2013. All of the warmest temperatures recorded in the overnights are all within the last decade. Take a look outside right now. Currently 114. Oh, well, we're going to have to fix our grid for today. We just added a degree. 9 miles an hour from the east. Humidity sitting at 19%. We tracked some thunderstorms in the mountains today. We'll be tracking more on Tuesday. I'll give you details on that. Next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air, shows us well above 115 by day and in those upper 80s by night. But let me show you my favorite number. 36 days till the autumnal equinox. Fall is right around the corner. Details on that and more numbers coming up.
Now, Cal ISO has said we remain in stage 2. No rolling blackouts have yet started. This is the latest update. Outages could begin, though, at 8 tonight, but they say that conservation is working, so just holding off on laundry. It's as simple as that. Can really help. Now an update on some of the fires burning in Southern California. The Dome Fire in San Bernardino County broke out last night in the Mojave National Preserve and has burned more than 40,000 acres.
The Ranch 2 fire in Los Angeles has burned 2,200 acres. It's 7% contained tonight. Police are looking for 36-year-old Palencia Osman. Investigators say he intentionally started this fire, but police do warn if you see this man, he could be violent, so call the police. The Apple Fire in Cherry Valley also expected to be fully contained today, and it was. This fire started back on the 31st of July. It's burned 33,000 acres at a cost of nearly $52 million. It's the largest fire in that region in more than a decade.
Congressman Raul Ruiz is heading back to Washington, having been called back by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for a Saturday vote on a funding bill for the Postal Service. The USPS has become a major component in the presidential election, and now, amid growing criticism, the White House says no mail sorting machines will be taken offline before the election. No mailboxes will be removed either. Olivia Sandusky is live now in La Quinta with more on these new developments. Olivia.
Sarah, this just continues to be a big topic of discussion between candidates and representatives here across the Coachella Valley. Congressman Ruiz will be a part of that vote. That's on August 22nd. He says it's very instrumental for this upcoming election.
We're going to run it well, and we're going to not lose so much money.
President Trump assures the country the United States Postal Service is running well. But the American Postal Workers Union expresses their own concerns as the agency reports billions in losses.
Our current administration, president, and new PMG are attacking us and trying to take away everything that we have worked hard for.
This isn't a political issue, you know. if we don't fund the Postal Service, you're going to have a lot of people out of jobs.
Speaker Pelosi has called the House to vote Saturday on the Delivering for America Act, which could prevent the Postal Service from making any changes to operations that were in place at the beginning of the year. Congressman Ruiz will take part in that vote. He believes it's crucial for communities and a safe and fair election.
It's caused damage to seniors, veterans, small businesses, and workers who rely on the mail. The president clearly states that he wants to prohibit people from voting safely. Instead, he wants to force them to take the risks and go out in public during a pandemic.
But not all local leaders agree. State Assembly candidate America Figueroa says voters should be able to choose the option they're most comfortable with and believes the issue is becoming too political.
There are instances where there is fraud or people that decide, from the postal office to not take certain ballots into the office. And I know even though this is a political issue, but don't try to bring your party or your position up using this issue, because that's not what the people needs right now.
Now, following that vote on Saturday, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy will testify before the House Oversight Committee. That will take place Monday, August 24th. Reporting live in La Quinta, Olivia Sandusky, NBC Palm Springs.
Coronavirus coverage brought to you by East Valley COVID-19 testing site, serving residents of eastern Coachella Valley.
All right, here's a look at our latest COVID-19 numbers for the county and for the Coachella Valley. And remember, on Mondays, we have a 3-day total because the county no longer reports those numbers on the weekend. So more than 1,800 new cases countywide, nearly 1,000 from the Coachella Valley, 31 new deaths countywide, 6 here in the desert.
And now to a You Ask, We Investigate report. A mother of 4 in Desert Hot Springs is taking legal action after video captured her landlord hopping a fence and allegedly disconnecting her air conditioning. That day, there was an excessive heat warning. Our Daytona Everett explains what happened and the protections tenants do and don't have when it comes to their landlords.
By the grace of God, we caught this video and there he was on the video, just hopping over.
Kertrisa Washington says the man in this video is Chris Dennis, her landlord.
I have 4 kids that live in this house. He took the disconnect out of our air conditioning unit so that our air conditioner would stop working.
When Kertrisa's house started getting hot, she started getting suspicious. Multiple air technicians told her the disconnect was missing, a part which makes the AC run. When she looked back at her camera, she says she was shocked to see her own landlord with what appears to be the disconnect in his hand.
It's been a nightmare.
NBC Palm Springs reached out to the landlord. His wife explained the situation, saying he wasn't trespassing, that Kertrisa knew they were doing repairs and wanted them, and that they've had continuous problems with her. They declined to do a recorded interview. The day after Kertrisa posted the video on her Facebook, she says she received a 3-day notice from Chris, along with messages asking for a rent payment. But she stopped paying her rent when she knew a foreclosure could be coming soon.
I got this nice little letter from the bank giving us, it's a notice of foreclosure sale, kind of giving me my tenant's rights and how to move forward. From that, I stopped paying the rent.
Kertrisa says she's always been a good tenant, nothing to make the landlord take this type of action. So now she's the one taking the action, legal action.
I'm not okay with it. I'll never be okay with it. So with that being said, we are moving forward in the court of law now to pursue justice.
In your eyes, does this tenant have the grounds to pursue a lawsuit?
Yeah, she can sue the landlord for trespass. There are only certain grounds under which a landlord can come onto the property under Civil Code 1954.
Ken Carlson says he's been inundated with calls from tenants about landlords taking desperate measures.
We've seen landlords using restraining orders to have a judge evict a tenant without any hearing. I think we'll see other efforts by landlords as the tsunami of evictions hits starting September 2nd.
There are more laws protecting landlords' rights than there are tenants' rights.
Daytona Everett, NBC Palm Springs.
And a reminder, if you have a story or problem you'd like us to look into, email us at news@nbcpalmsprings.com. You ask, we investigate. Well, when it comes to cannabis research, scientists have long faced hurdles to get federal approval. But now, for the first time, a lab is set to receive a contract with the federal government. And that team will set up their lab right here in the Coachella Valley. Now, this is not a dispensary or a grower. This is a state-of-the-art research center, the likes of which have never been seen. Regina Urita has more.
Gino, long before this facility, Desert Hot Springs had been the leader in marijuana cultivation in the state. The city is hoping this massive new site will not only bring jobs to the city, but change the perception.
Well, they're recreational. Ours is medicine.
Mark Crozier, the CEO of Royal Emerald Pharmaceuticals, wants to make it clear his 3 million square foot facility is not a dispensary. They're focused on science, research, and development. The company is already the first in the nation to get a government contract to work on medicine derived from THC and CBD. Now they're working on getting approval from the FDA.
Nobody's done clinicals. Nobody knows the attributes, what it will and won't do. That's what we're going to prove or disprove.
The facility will manufacture non-addictive medicine. It will be used to treat veterans and first responders that suffer from PTSD.
Unfortunately, for a lot of people, the opioid addiction, pain medicines and things was just, everybody gave them opioids. And now we have a huge opioid problem with the veterans, and not just veterans, but everybody.
City officials say the scientific facility will change the perception of the city, not to mention the 400 jobs it will add. But some residents are concerned that the cultivation can end up in the wrong hands.
Even though this facility is located in a public parking lot where people are able to come in and out anytime, behind this gate, there is high-level security that includes over 80 cameras that are constantly monitoring anyone who's trying to trespass.
Cannabis industry came in, we made policies strong that there were going to be armed guards, visible security measures.
In addition to pharmaceutical research and development, by 2021, there will also be a 200-bed facility used to help treat opioid addiction. For NBC Palm Springs, I'm Regina Urita.
All right, thank you, Regina. Still ahead, a march on Washington that's being launched from the Palm Springs Air Museum. We'll tell you about that coming up.
And later tonight, 2020, year like never before, Democrats kicking off the nation's first virtual nominating convention. We hear from our political analyst, Hank Plan, about what this means for the election. We first told you about Chauncey Spencer back in June. A Palm Desert man is building a mobile museum about African Americans in aviation. Well, that museum is complete. And as our Kitty Alvarado shows us, now the real journey begins.
It's a big day for Chauncey Spencer.
If I was any more excited, I'd have a heart attack in a happy way.
A day he dreamed about years ago is finally here. The launch of his African Americans in Aviation Travel Museum.
Today, we're going to be on our way across more than 18 states, 25 cities, and we're going to do 7,000 miles.
Their destination, the March on Washington, with stops along the way in major cities to educate young people about a part of the American story that's rarely told.
There's a piece of American history that's been left out.
Making that journey with him will be 22-year-old Tori Hilbert from Long Beach, an intern with the National College Resources Foundation, or NCRF, a nonprofit working to bring equity in education. He hopes, like him, young people are able to see the possibilities through this history.
At least I have a better understanding from where I come from, because it's not normal to talk about airplanes. It's not normal to talk about African American pilots. And so since I have that understanding, how I feel, my energy towards it will be different.
The museum built inside this travel trailer tells the story of the African American pioneer pilots who found a way to make their dreams of flight possible during a time when they were told the color of their skin disqualified them from even trying. Among them, Chauncey Spencer's father. Chauncey Spencer Sr. tried to get flying lessons at 16. The response?
We don't teach color to fly. They don't have the intelligence. It hurt my father, but it didn't stop his dream.
Spencer defied the odds and helped get African Americans into the Civil Pilots Training Program that produced the legendary Tuskegee Airmen. Dr. Teresa Price, founder and CEO of the NCRF, says her organization sponsored this project to help future generations sprout wings.
This is to inspire everyone that never thought they could fly high, because all things are possible.
Kitty Alvarado, NBC Palm Springs.
We'll be right back after the break. In fact, Mike will have your forecast for you. Mike.
Sarah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We've got record temperatures, we've got earthquakes, we've even got some humidity to talk about. More importantly, we're going to talk about when it becomes more pleasant when we come back. welcome back. Here's a live look courtesy of our Walter Clark 111 cam. You can see the humidity in the air. We're going to show you, we'll quantify that in just a moment. But yeah, August, not a fan. I'm going to give it 1 star as far as ratings go. You know what? Beautiful shot, though. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of wind happening out there. We will see that breeze pick up a little bit later this evening. We're going to start this evening with earthquakes. I don't know if you felt any of those tremblers early this morning. It was fairly active to our south. In fact, a 5.1 was recorded just after 8:30 this morning way down there in Mexico. You can see several aftershocks that were in the 3 range. All of that on the back of what was a fairly active week here. In fact, over the last 7 days, we've seen lots of rumbling along the San Andreas Fault, especially down towards the Salton Sea. Of note was a 3.6 that took place almost a week ago. That was back on the 11th, but all those little dots that you see are all of the motion that's taking place along the San Andreas Fault. And of course, the reminder here is to have a plan in place. We were talking about that earlier with the rolling blackouts. Well, that rolls into your earthquake preparedness as well. Excessive heat warning, it kicked in on Friday, obviously was in place throughout the weekend when we were breaking records across Southern California, has now been extended out to Thursday for the Coachella Valley. And of course, you're seeing that all across the region as well. We were watching that earlier. That is such a large warning that it actually goes up into California, parts of Oregon, Utah, Nevada. This is a big, powerful ridge of high pressure. Here's what temperatures will do all the way through Thursday. It looks like we are locked into a very similar zone that we saw going into the weekend. The only place you'll see any relief will be near the immediate coast there and mountains above 5,000 feet. But we are tracking some storms in the mountains. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Not sure if you saw this on the interwebs today, but this got a lot of attention. 130 degrees recorded yesterday in Death Valley. Just in case you're wondering, the hottest ever recorded is also at the Furnace Creek Ranch, aptly named, in Death Valley. There, 134.1 back in 1913. It's disputed. In fact, the second place one, 131 in Tunisia, is also disputed because back in that time, it wasn't exactly the most reliable equipment there. Death Valley and Kuwait hold the second place there at 129.2. If that 130 comes through, it could be the highest verified temperature in recorded history. Futurecast showing some of that moisture coming up from the south there. That will manifest as some showers tomorrow. In fact, we'll be tracking more of that cumulus along the mountains. Could fire off some storms. The big risk there will be some dry lightning and some gusty winds. It's something to keep in mind. And if you've got some hiking plans up in the upper elevations, be careful in the afternoon. It's muggy out there, 65 dew point. That's going to be about 25% humidity on Tuesday. On top of that, temperatures in that 108 to 112 range here right now. Breeze getting ready to kick up from the northwest. We'll get up to about 20 miles an hour along the I-10 corridor tonight. We start hot on Tuesday. We stay hot, and look at those elevated dew points. 116 in Palm Springs Inn and Indio, 107 in Joshua Tree, 84 in Big Bear, and your Comfort Air 7-day forecast showing very little comfort on the horizon. We will finally get down to 111 on Saturday, but it looks like it warms up again behind that.
Millions of Americans have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Months later, some people still haven't received unemployment. And for those who have received that check, it can be too little, too late. Vanessa Yurchevich reports.
I had negative money. I had negative $170-something in my bank account.
For more than 4 months, Daniel Vogt waited for unemployment after losing his bartending job in Washington, D.C. Last week, a debit card finally arrived, loaded with thousands of dollars in unemployment back pay.
When you look at that card, what do you think?
I'm just really apathetic about this country. I've seen it have a lot of opportunities to do the right thing and take the other option every time.
The damage is already done. He maxed out his credit card and says he got evicted by his roommates after he couldn't make rent. Now he's living with his dad in the Bronx.
If they had given me the money earlier, it wouldn't have been this big of a problem, and the amount of money they gave me would have been fine. But now I have all these compounded problems.
The safety net failed Vogt, and he's not alone. The pandemic has cost the U.S. nearly 13 million jobs, leaving Americans to face a system ill-equipped to handle the surge. The consequences are real. Without more government aid, up to 40 million Americans face eviction by the end of the year.
Nobody pays attention to unemployment insurance when the unemployment rate is 3 or 4%. So some states just sort of ignored their system since the last recession to make it harder for people to get benefits.
Like Leah Arrington. She applied for unemployment and pandemic unemployment assistance, but after months of waiting, she says the Georgia Department of Labor denied her both because she was terminated from her job last September due to attendance. She was the medical proxy for her terminally ill sister and had to make the decision to end her life. Her grief made it hard to get out of bed.
Each person's particular circumstances needs to be individually heard. Ultimately, I was not at fault for my sister dying, and it caused me total financial chaos.
She says she's $15,000 in debt and hasn't been able to make rent in months. She sends her 15-year-old daughter to friends' homes to get 3 full meals a day. Arrington says she applies for jobs every day, but with millions of other Americans looking, it's been an uphill battle.
I haven't had any offers, so pretty much just still continue to search and look and put my best foot forward.
Out of options, Arrington says she's appealing her unemployment decision. This appeal is her last hope.
I still have no relief on any of my financial situations. Seem to be getting worse, but I'm remaining hopeful.
That was Vanessa Yurchevich reporting. A report published by the Aspen Institute found 40 million Americans could be evicted by the end of this year. It also found the U.S. might be facing the most severe housing crisis in history if conditions do not change.
Coming up next, some colleges and universities have reopened, but they're learning a COVID-19 lesson the hard way. We'll tell you about that when we come back.
As COVID-19 continues to spread, hotspots now include a number of college campuses as students return to class. And scientists at one university have developed what they believe is a groundbreaking new weapon in the fight against the virus. Jay Gray has the latest.
On college campuses across the country, the school year starts with parties and problems.
I hate to say that I've kind of expected with such large amounts of students interacting in person on campus.
At the University of North Carolina, at least 4 student housing units are dealing with coronavirus outbreaks. At Oklahoma State, 23 have tested positive, quarantined in an off-campus sorority house. And there are at least 45 confirmed cases at Notre Dame.
Many of the cases that have been identified at Notre Dame to this point all seem to have a common exposure at an off-campus gathering.
Across the nation, the numbers continue to climb. Now, more than 5 million cases and more than 170,000 deaths. Scientists at Yale University have developed a new testing procedure, the Food and Drug Administration granting emergency use authorization for Saliva Direct, an inexpensive saliva-based test that can be self-administered with results available in less than 24 hours.
This is one of the most significant advances in the 6 months we've been living with coronavirus.
An important new weapon in a fight against the virus that most agree is still far from over. Jay Gray, NBC News.
All right, taking a live look outside right now, courtesy of our Agua Caliente Casino cam, as we check in with Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett, standing by with a look at that AccuWeather forecast. Hey, Mike.
Gino, that image perfectly encapsulates what kind of day we had across the Coachella Valley. Not only were we hot, but we're seeing some increased humidity as well. And it's really just making that air thick out there. Dew points are very high right now. In fact, we'll continue to stay that way through the rest of the week. And that moisture plus heat could be firing off some storms as early as tomorrow. We'll talk about that in a moment too. Massive heat wave, in case you haven't heard. Well, here's what's different about this. You know, 2 or 3 times already this summer, we've got up to 120 and then we've backed that off again. What's different about this is we got hot on Friday. We stayed hot through the weekend, and it looks like we're going to continue to stay hot through most of the week as well. Through Tuesday, most of the entire Southwest will run 15 to 30 degrees above normal. Records have been broken. We'll talk about that coming up. Heat-related illness is a major issue here, and those rolling blackouts we've been telling you about will also be an issue. If you're wondering how pervasive this is, well, everything that you see in purple here, that is the excessive heat warning. So it's not just a Coachella Valley thing. It's not just a Southern California thing. Over 60 million people affected by that heat right now. Broken records today in the area. Borrego, San Jacinto, Campbell, and Idlewild broke records. Idlewild hit 98 today. It's the highest temperature ever recorded in August for that community. Currently 112 at the airport right now. Not a whole lot of wind giving us ventilation, and humidity sitting at 20%. Yeah, it's humid out there. We'll talk about storm formation coming up in the full forecast. Next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air. Shows us hot and uncomfortable through Thursday. We'll see if we can get this heat to break coming up.
Well, beginning today, it's going to be a convention like nothing we've ever seen. Completely virtual, no big halls, no banners, and no balloon drop. Join us to talk about the Democrat convention, which begins tonight, is our own NBC Palm Springs political analyst, Hank Plant. Hank, did you ever think you'd live long enough to see a convention where nobody was in the same room at the same time?
Yeah, you know, they've always been coronations. We haven't had an honest-to-God convention where the nominee is picked in a long, long time. They've been coronations. They've been free commercials for the party. But this one sure is different, as you say.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. The last time there was actually a candidate selected at the convention would be what, 56?
Yeah, yes. Well, you know, it did get down to JFK and Lyndon Johnson in 1960. Yeah, it's just been ages since there have been really nominating vehicles.
Right. Are you expecting any surprises this week? I mean, the platform's pretty much set. Obviously, the candidates are set. What are you really expecting this week from the Democrats?
I think what we're going to see, Gino, is, of course, a chance for the nominee, Mr. Biden, and Senator Harris, the vice president nominee, to showcase their speaking skills. But this is also a chance to show off up-and-comers in the Democratic Party. Pete Buttigieg, who you know, former mayor in Indiana, you'll be seeing him speaking. You'll be seeing a lot of members of Congress. Hakeem Jeffries, African-American congressman from New York, who might be the next speaker. You'll be seeing him. This is a chance to really show off their bench.
Next week, same thing for the Republicans. Again, a coronation. Obviously, the candidates are going to be the same because it's re-election for them. Any surprises you think we'll see next week from the Republicans?
I think the big surprise is that President Trump has said he's going to deliver his acceptance speech from the White House, from the lawn at the White House. I don't even know if that's legal. So let's see if that really happens. That's the big surprise so far.
All right. Hank Plant, NBC Palm Springs political analyst. Thank you, sir, as always.
Coming up next in sports, it's finally playoff time in the NBA bubble. We'll have highlights from the first couple of games. That's after the break.
All right, time for a check here, NBC Palm Springs sports headlines. Well, it's finally NBA playoff time in the Orlando bubble. After seeding games finished last week, the postseason got underway today with the Nuggets and the Jazz. The Nuggets entered as a 3 seed, facing off against 6-seeded Jazz. The game was a thriller, at least as far as any Jazz-Nuggets game can go. Going to overtime, both teams finished tied at 115. The Nuggets pulled away in overtime, 135-125. Donovan Mitchell for the Jazz scored 57 points. That's the third most points ever in a postseason game. Now to the NFL. ESPN has named their new Monday Night Football booth team. Play-by-play duties will be handled by Steve Levy, longtime ESPN anchor. Brian Griese, son of a Hall of Fame quarterback, and Louis Riddick will be the analyst in the booth with Levy. Griese is a former Pro Bowler himself and has been calling college football for ESPN for more than 10 years. Riddick is a former Raider defensive back and front office executive who's been working on NFL pregame coverage. The NFL season gets underway September 10th with the Texans and the Chiefs, which of course you can see right here on NBC Palm Springs as we kick off Sunday Night Football on Thursday night. Don't ask. It's just how it is. That's a quick check of your sports. The Lakers play tomorrow, and that's what really matters. Dodgers playing right now. Let's check in with Mike for the latest on the weather. Hey, Mike.
Gina just showed you a lot of numbers and gave you a lot of information there. I'm just going to show you a sunset. It's a fairly tranquil looking one out there. There's lots of moisture in the atmosphere, giving a little bit of a haze and a hue. More moisture and more heat. Details when we come back. Welcome back. I saw a t-shirt the other day that literally just said 2020 1 star, wouldn't recommend. I thought it was hilarious. Well, it also applies to the weather today as well. Was not a big fan because heat we can deal with. When you take heat and humidity and you put it together, well, it just feels oppressive and it looks like that. You can see that haze hanging off along the north and northwestern edge of the Coachella Valley as the sun's setting. At least makes for a beautiful sunset. Here's what I choose to focus on. 36 is the number of days until we hit the autumnal equinox, and yeah, you bet I'm going to be doing a daily countdown on that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that on Tuesday, September 22nd, boom, temperatures are just going to drop down into the 70s and everything's going to be puppies and rainbows, but at least it gives us something psychologically to look forward to. The days are getting shorter and cooler weather will eventually return. Temperatures today hit 114 at Palm Springs International. Some quick math telling you well above average, 4 degrees below the record there. Records were broken in the area today. It's the overnights that were really concerning, though. When you're only getting it down to 90, again, that's a function of heat and humidity together. The moisture traps the heat and doesn't allow it to escape at night. So instead of 78, 90 is what we got. And several communities across Southern California broke records in that, including Palm Springs. 87 was the old overnight record. You didn't have to go back too far to look either. Thermal broke a record. Idlewild broke a record, 69 instead of their 65. It was warm up there today. They broke a daytime heat record, too. Excessive heat warning, in case you haven't heard, kicked in on Friday, will now be here until Thursday. Yeah, this is a very powerful ridge of high pressure that's right on top of us. So temperatures across the region, well, they're going to be warm. The only place you can really go is above 5,000 feet in the mountains or to the immediate coast. But as we've seen in the mountains, you saw that bubbling cumulus there today. More of that expected on Tuesday, and that could fire some storms up into the mountains. Let me show you. Put Futurecast into motion. This is tonight. No worries here, except I am tracking one storm down towards the south that could actually blow some dust up in the overnight hours. Do be aware of that. Then as we go into Tuesday there, you'll see those storms firing up, especially over San Jacinto and the Santa Rosas. We'll see that out towards the San Bernardinos as well. Dry lightning will be an issue. Gusty winds will be as well. Dew points and humidity, 20-25% will be the minimum. It's muggy out there. 108 currently in Desert Hot Springs, 111 in Coachella. Not much wind to speak of. It will pick up a little bit later this evening, get up to about 15-20 miles an hour in our more wind-prone spots. We start warm on Tuesday, and then we get hot. 116 is what we'll see in most communities in the Coachella Valley. In fact, we're going to see that through Thursday. Then we'll see a little bit of a dip on the weekend, but then it gets warm again next week. It's August. Again, 36 days till fall.
And more about the U.S. Postal Service and the controversy surrounding it. Speaker Pelosi has called the House to vote Saturday on the Delivering for America Act. Act, which would prevent the USPS from changing any operations that were in place at the beginning of the year. Congressman Aurel Ruiz will take part in that vote. He says it's necessary for our communities to have a safe election.
It's caused damage to seniors, veterans, small businesses, and workers who rely on the mail. The president clearly states that he wants to prohibit people from voting safely. Instead, he wants to force them to take the risks and go out in public during a pandemic.
Following this vote, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy will testify in front of the House Oversight Committee. That will take place on August 24th.
Desert Pass is brought to you by Mike Thompson RV. Your adventure starts here.
Thunderbird Country Club was the first country club in the Coachella Valley, and from the start was a hot spot for Hollywood's biggest stars. Unless those stars were Jewish. Thunderbird was a restricted club at the time, and that's why right across the street, Tamarisk Country Club was born.
No matter what it is or who commenced it, I'm against it.
Groucho Marx reportedly once said, "I wouldn't belong to any club that would have me as a member." And sadly, the Thunderbird Country Club in Rancho Mirage was one of those clubs who wouldn't have Groucho or Harpo or Zeppo for that matter as a member. It's one of the Valley's darker truths. Many clubs, hotels, and restaurants were Gentiles only.
That began the process that ultimately became Tamarisk Country Club, and when they opened it, they used to sell memberships and plots of land adjacent to the fairways. And that was part of the deal.
Established in 1952, Tamarisk Country Club was only the second 18-hole private club in the Coachella Valley. Founding members included Hollywood A-listers in the 1950s, including Danny Kaye, Jack Benny, George Burns, and 4 of the 5 Marx Brothers, just to name a few of what they call the Golden 65. Representing the founding members of Tamarisk, and none of those A-listers could have joined Thunderbird in 1951.
Say, mister, is this the only way to get to Palm Springs?
Jack Benny liked to play golf. He wasn't as good a golfer as my dad was. One day he decided to see if he could join a club or something, and they went to a particular club down here which was restricted, and asked if he could join. He didn't know at the time, and they said, no, this is a restricted club. And he went back to Hillcrest Country Club. That's when my dad and a few other people said, hey, why would you want to be the only Jew among Gentiles? I mean, token?
And though Tamarisk was created for Jews who couldn't join across the street at Thunderbird, it wasn't Jewish only. Frank Sinatra, who took many different stands against racism in his own way, chose to build his second desert home at Tamarisk. And so did Frank's pals, including Sammy Davis Jr. And it wasn't long before Thunderbird members were crossing the street to attend parties thrown by Tamarisk members, which legend has were some of the best parties thrown in the desert. But party or not, Harpo Marx loved the desert year-round in various degrees of temperature and apparently various degrees of clothing.
Well, he was the first person I ever knew that played 18 holes of golf nude.
Now, where did this take place?
In Palm Springs, when most people left during the summer. He was a sun worshiper. And so I went out with him one day on a golf court, and he'd hit a golf ball, and then he'd run over and jump in a neighbor's pool that was adjacent to the fairway, take a dip, jump back in the golf cart. We'd go to the ball. The next day, he played 18 holes of golf that way.
Absolutely nude.
Absolutely.
And even though Tamarisk Country Club was born out of discrimination of the time, Harpo's son doesn't believe Tamarisk Country Club was built out of spite or out of resentment, but rather the realities of the time.
They had spent so many years with anti-Semitism in the South, you know, going one-nighters, two-dayers, those kind of things. It just kind of rolled off their back. And yet I know that deep down, they probably had some resentment.
brighter side of the news is brought to you by Holland RV, located off the I-10 at Washington.
A neighborhood outside Sacramento is dealing with a cat burglar, a literal cat burglar. Jax the cat breaks into homes through open windows or pet doors and sneaks away with whatever he can find, like mops, toys, rags, garden gloves, socks, and even underwear. The owner then launders them and returns them and says, "I'm sorry." We'll see you at 11.